Welcome. What did we even title this?
Maintaining your body for the 8-show week. Healthy habits that actually work and how to implement them like an actual professional.
Yeah, so really glad that you're all with us today. I'm Libby Parker. I'm the Broadway Dietitian. So just a brief background on me. I've been a registered dietitian for the last 11 years, working primarily with eating disorders. I'm a certified eating disorder specialist and grew up doing dance and theater and work with theater professionals to take care of their bodies from a weight-neutral perspective. She's going to bark at everyone coming in. This is my dog Shira, by the way. She will come and greet you all. And what else did I want to say? This is my second year speaking at Broadway Con, and we're going to be talking a little more about what we're getting into, but I'll pass it over to Megan.
Hi, I'm Dr. Megan Wise. I am the Broadway PT, and which is fun because we made our names before we even knew each other.
Yes,
and
we actually connected through Instagram.
Yeah, we connected through Instagram. But I am a physical therapist, a certified strength and conditioning specialist, a certified Pilates teacher, and a life coach. So I kind of do everything holistically for performing artists and other arts workers, and adjacent to that, to make sure you can do what you want, when you want, without fear or pain. So that is my whole thing. This is my first time talking at Broadway Con, but I'm super excited to talk about this so that maybe we can avoid some injuries, avoid some problems, and get you on the right track.
All right, I think you're going into what we see.
All right, so the reason that we're kind of doing this talk is because we do see performing artists and arts workers who get a lot of injuries and a lot of problems around trying to sustain that 8-show week mentality and physicality. And so we tend to see things like people getting really tired and fatigued most often. In fact, that seems to be the number one reason people get injured and people kind of burn out and then don't want to do this anymore is because of fatigue. And there are ways to combat that. So you will even notice this when you get tired, just in like a regular daily activities. You might notice like your technique, your speed, your cleanliness and choreography can be really effective. How well you can actually project your voice and how much it takes to then actually sing and speak. It takes more breath control if you're tired. Things like your attention, your coordination, and your focus gets a little off. So you can start lagging in memory, or maybe you're dropping lines or you're kind of late for an entrance or an exit. And then obviously like your mood, your tolerance for other people if something goes wrong, because let's face it, it's live theater, things happen. If you're fatigued, that really annoys you and it becomes another whole problem in terms of mental, emotional fatigue as well. So that is what we're going to try to combat today by giving you better resources in the first place.
And specifically for how I work with people, I really wanted to approach it from something that isn't really studied in the musical theater world in particular, and that is, how is our relationship with food really affecting our performance as well? So again, I work a lot with eating disorders and disordered eating, and I don't want people to fall into that. It's not widely researched in musical theater, but we know from dance about 50% of dancers at every level are struggling with some form of disordered eating. So we can kind of extrapolate, it's probably pretty similar in the musical theater world with all of, thank you for all the nodding, with all of the pressures that are put on us both internally and externally, because, to be that triple quadruple threat, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, and there's a lot of pressure being put on you, costuming, all of that stuff. So I really loved looking at this as sports nutrition for theater athletes. So we're going to be talking a little bit about timing of food and what to incorporate in meals pre and post show. If we have time, we'll get into a little bit of avoiding digestive issues on stage and things like that. But there are just so many facets to how we eat affecting how we perform. A lot of what Megan already said, particularly concentration. Sorry. And yes, love being right next to that main stage. And I think, one take-home message I want to give you before you all kind of start falling asleep a little bit is don't compare yourself to anyone else. Everyone is extremely unique, and there's no reason that we need to be comparing ourselves to someone else, because think a lot of the beauty of making art, making theater, is that we have these unique stories to tell, these unique bodies to tell them in. We don't all need to look the same or be the same.
So I will take on kind of what we're going to be talking about. I mentioned fatigue is the major factor. So I like to joke about, everyone has seen the Snickers ads of like, you're not you when you're hungry. You can kind of replace that with anything. You're not you when you're tired. You're not you when you are in a bad mood. You're not you when you're overtrained, so you've done too much. So you can kind of put anything in that category. You're not you, so we need to find a way to keep you nourished, whether that's literally with nutrition or with the right training, or maybe it's actually finding your recovery and rest. And so none of these things, actually maybe you just need to like take a minute and be yourself for a bit so that you can be you when the time is necessary for you to perform at your best. So like I said, Libby's going to take you through the nutrition component. I'm going to take you through the training component, and we will get to move during that. So I'm going to show you some things. We get to actually exercise instead of just sitting here the whole time. And then we'll kind of be rounding off with some recovery techniques that are actually way easier to implement right now.
And before I jump into that, we both have signups for our email list, social media stuff, so please follow us, check out what we're doing. We love connecting with theater people, obviously. So let's talk about practical ways to properly fuel for sustained energy. And this is really, I want to say, kind of general information as well. This is not specific to performers. We can definitely, if someone's working with me one-on-one, we will get in and really tweak your schedule. But this will work for everyone, even if you're not on stage. But I do want you to think of this in terms of how is your rehearsal and performance schedule looking in relation to this as well. So I want to start because I think one of the main questions I get asked is about timing of eating before a show. A lot of people are like, I get really nervous and I'm afraid to eat before a show, and I'm afraid I'm going to get bloated, or they're like, I get so exhausted, or, I've worked with, most of my background's in community theater, regional theater, and that's a lot of the people I work with still. And it's, going from school or work all day long and then going into those late night rehearsals, not getting home till 11 p.m. And, do I grab fast food on the way? Do I not eat till I get home at 11? What do I do? And so to really just look at the timing of our eating, we do want to be eating really spaced out throughout the day. We don't want to put all of our food onto, skewed to one end of the day or the other. We want it really spaced out. And when we're looking at going into something really active, whether it's a rehearsal or a show, or even for other sports, we want to be eating, a pretty good meal, anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours before the event, depending on your personal body and how that works for you. So this is where it's really important to test this stuff out when you're not going on to a show right now. Like, try it in rehearsal, try it in your daily life, see what different timing sits with your body, what different foods sit with your body really well. And we want to be looking at a mixed meal for this. So with all of our meals, we want to be hitting 5 categories of food. Okay, this is how we're getting our balanced nutrition. So we have calcium-rich foods, and I can go into a little more detail on any of these, but just to give the categories. So calcium-rich foods, protein, fat, grain or starch, fruit or vegetable, and then you can also add in fun foods, which is anything goes. Yes, the song just started. That happens. So if we're hitting those 5 categories in our 3 meals a day, or if you're doing like 6 mini meals, also great. It's good to hit all of those at least 3 times a day, because then we're getting our nutrient needs pretty well met. We don't want to eat just one thing at a time. Our body really likes to have mixed meals because they work synergistically with each other to get the nutrition in and to sustain our energy as well. So with that being said, again, we're eating throughout the day. We're eating a meal 30 minutes to 2 hours before the show, before the event, if you're doing a dance competition or something before that. And then we're also wanting to look at if you need snacks throughout that time as well. So during a show or during a long day of rehearsal, we do want to be snacking throughout the day. And what is really going to keep you full, focused, it sounds like that commercial too, is combining carbohydrate with a protein and or fat. So just some example ideas, it could be like a fruit and nut butter, or cheese and crackers, trail mix, things on that order. So again, we're pairing a carbohydrate with a protein and or fat. And the carbohydrate gives us that quick energy, and the protein and fat slow it down so we're not getting that crash. It's letting it go into our bloodstream a little slower, and it's giving us that sustained energy as well as a good mix of nutrients again. Also, I think pretty important. So I just want people to shout this out. What are our 3 macronutrients, if anyone knows what those are? Shout them out.
Lipids, carbohydrates.
Carbohydrates.
Proteins.
Carbohydrates, fats, proteins. Yes, great. So those are our 3 macronutrients. We want all of them. All foods fit in a healthy diet, and we want all of those in our diet. But if we're looking at performers, honestly anyone in the theater industry, you're endurance athletes. Whether you're on stage or backstage, whether you're dancing or working lighting, you're endurance athletes, which means we want to skew on the higher side of carbohydrates because that is going to, again, sustain our energy. So if we're eating an adequate amount of calories for our body's needs, 50 to 60% of our intake should be coming from carbohydrate-rich foods. So fruits and veggies, grains, nuts and seeds, dairy, I'm probably forgetting something, but those categories of food, we want a lot of that. That is giving us that sustained glucose in our bloodstream that is keeping us going all day long. So I just want to hit on a couple more things because we have a lot of fun music coming up. A really important thing that I feel like you got the vibe of from what I've already been talking about, but don't go on a bad diet, please. Just skip the diets. They really don't do you any good. And just kind of a brief summary, there's a lot of diets that work in that you can lose some weight quickly, but if diets really worked, why would it be a multi-billion-dollar industry that you have to keep going on a new one all the time because it inevitably fails? And if we really get into it, the long-term health implications of going on these diets, particularly calorie-restricted diets or ones that are cutting out whole groups of foods, they can be really dangerous for our long-term health. Something that you might not notice the first couple of weeks that you're on this diet or right after, but 5 years, 10 years from now, what does that impact on your health? And man, I can talk about that all day long. I'm going to skip it for now, but don't go on diets. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is hydration. So as you see, we have our little water bottles here. It is really great to just be sipping water throughout the day to stay hydrated rather than chugging it. By sipping, we're not only hydrating our whole body, you're hydrating your vocal folds. So if we're speaking, singing, all of that, we want to keep those moistened all the time. I know there's a lot of those water vaporizers that you can use as well. Those are excellent for getting in and steaming your vocal folds and nasal passages as well. I love those before performance. But really, we just want to keep the hydration coming in. And if just straight up water isn't doing it for you, you can have other beverages as well. Teas, soups, fruits and vegetables have high water content, so it doesn't need to be coming just from straight up water. Things that are not hydrating, however, are alcohol and caffeine, so don't count those towards your water intake. Just drink in moderation if you're old enough, all that stuff. I think that's kind of what I want to talk about nutrition. Yes.
As a person who doesn't like the taste of coffee, I use caffeine pills if I'm really tired. Is that the same effect? Because the pill is different?
So in terms of the hydration, that doesn't matter because there's no water in it. But for the caffeine piece of it, the thing that worries me about caffeine in non-coffee tea substances is the higher amounts of it that it's really easy to overdose. And I don't know as much about caffeine pills, but I know energy drinks are very, very dangerous. It's the one thing I tell people not to consume actually, because it's not just the caffeine content in there. Like if you have, your typical energy drink, maybe it's like 300 milligrams grams of caffeine, it's like 2 cups of coffee, not that extreme. But we're looking at the other ingredients that are in there as well, and they create a compounding effect on that caffeine. It can be like easily a 10-fold increase, which can cause your heart to speed up, go into arrhythmia, and heart attack. So a lot of people actually end up in the emergency room every year because of energy drinks. So that's one thing I say please don't do. Pretty much everything else is on the table, literally, but the caffeine pills I'm not as sure about. If it was just like, if it's literally just caffeine, I would just be very cautious and make sure that you're not overdoing it.
There's no like vocal impact, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think there's any vocal impact, but if you're going to go into physical activity already on caffeine,
Yeah, we
physical
don't.
activity is already increasing your heart rate, so it's just going to be like
Yeah, we
you're
don't.
at
wanna-
heart attack level for no reason.
Yeah, don't caffeinate before working out. It's kind of the big thing.
Like your heart rate should be elevated when you're performing just because you're doing more. So
Yeah.
physically, you shouldn't need that boost from caffeine, and it's not going to change your concentration levels either of the caffeine.
Yeah. So be cautious.
It's very interesting because someone who has ADHD, my doctor has even said that like on days that you maybe don't take as much ADHD meds because you want to have it work stronger on another day, you could supplement caffeine instead. But I'm hearing that it's so different.
It's nuanced.
Yeah.
Like, which, yeah.
Yeah, and again, like from coffee or tea, it would be because there's other compounds in there that are also beneficial to the body and like help interact with it. It's easier on the body versus just straight up caffeine. Well, I'm gonna pass it over to Megan.
Yeah, so we'll do a breakdown into some of the stuff we're going to do before we move. I know, it's a great crowd over in whichever group that is. All right, so as I said, we're going to do some movement, but first I'm going to break down a couple things that are a few questions that I tend to get. So some people have no idea the difference between cross-training and conditioning, which is totally fine because I feel like no one ever teaches this. So as performing artists, you are artistic athletes. Even if you don't view yourself as athletic, you are doing something endurance-based, and you're using your entire body to do it for long periods of time, so you are an athlete. Athletes do need to do things like cross-train and condition, but they are separate things. So cross-training means that that is not something that looks or feels like what you do for your activity. So that means marathon runners, for example, might use cycling and swimming as their cross-training because it's still helping them, it's making them well-rounded, but it's not the exact same activity, so they're not overdoing it in their cross-training. Conditioning, on the other hand, does look and feel like your activity. So this has a very specific goal in mind, so if you have a goal of, I want to increase my endurance for performance, because I'm on stage and like some of these pieces are 10 minutes long and I'm doing an all-out sprint, then you would condition for that specific purpose. So it's something like, I see a lot of dancers specifically, especially like ballet dancers that I work with, who they think that taking yoga and Pilates is cross-training, but it's literally exactly what they're doing, just laying down most of the time. So it's actually not helping. It's not helping to like actually get them well-rounded. They're actually like repeating the same motions over and over again, and it's not necessarily a good thing to just get stuck in that rut, even if that's the rut you think you should be in. You still need to have a variability of movement available to you and options so that you might not be getting the same type of role with every performance you're in. Especially in musical theater, the goal is to do all different kinds of things. So it shouldn't be that you're only going down one path all the time. So that is the difference between cross-training and conditioning. We can go into examples for that too. Like I have some people that come to me that they want to improve their flexibility because they want to be able to get their legs up higher. And so then we would do conditioning specifically for that. Not because they're injured, but because they want to be able to do that safely and consistently every time. Or maybe they're trying to condition so that they can actually sing the same note when they're jumping up and down at the end, at the end of the show, when it's all of this and they're trying to not sound like they're jumping. So we're actually working on conditioning their vocal folds while they're doing cardio activities. So we can make it super specific, super fun too, because then you can get really creative. And sometimes they also have people just lay flat on their back and sing. So like it gets really awkward and weird and super fun at the same time. But yeah, conditioning it looks very similar to what your actual activity is, whereas cross-training is like anything under the sun. So have fun with it, do lots of different things because your body will be happy with you for a longer amount of time if you give it more options. So with that being said, I'm going to take you all through some exercises that everyone, all humans, not just certain kind of performers, should be doing, because one, they're normal human movements, and two, you're doing crazy human movements when you are a performing artist. You are now then like on steroids. Instead of just doing something normal like sitting, you're jumping up and down from sitting. So you have to be able to get these activities in regardless. So there are 7 basic movements that I give everyone. So if you don't know how to make your own exercise plan, at least have these 7 in there. These are well-rounded. Does not matter your age, your level, your style, whatever it might be. Your actual like ability level, whether you have a disability, this is still something that you can incorporate in there because there are variations on them. So we will go through these together, which is fun because we all get to stand now. All right, we'll start with upper body, overhead press. Does anyone know how to do an overhead press? Boom, it sounds exactly like what it is, yeah, overhead press. Because this looks like anytime you are lifting a person, a set piece, a prop. If you're on tour and you have to put your stuff in the overhead bin, if you have to, it's simple things like that, you're doing it all the time. If you're a little shorter and you have to reach for something, these are things that you have to do. They're normal activities, but then on steroids. If you were doing crazy stuff in the back, you still need to be able to do that without throwing out your back. And if you are then, of course, lifting other people and things, you also want to make sure you are being safe to yourself and to the person that you are manipulating in space. So, overhead presses, you can do any variation. Yes. Any variation will do. You can do single arm. You can do in front and the side. It's anything that you want to do. You can do. I have people doing it single leg balance. If they're really trying to focus on their balance and doing things like this, because then it makes it different. Or I have them doing, having them actually vocalize while doing stuff too. It's like maybe if they're literally doing the bit where they have to hold Simba and hold a note. I think the puppet might actually be about the same weight as she is. So, that would be a worthwhile thing to practice. Making sure you're doing that without feeling like you're straining your back to get there. So there are things that you can directly correlate to activities not only in your life but in your performance. So overhead press is one of the exercises. Another one for upper body would be wood chops. It's actually upper body and core. So you're going to hear that I'm not telling you to do anything like a plank because we don't typically lean into a plank very often on a regular basis. But wood chops are very important because it involves rotation while you're moving. So a wood chop is basically going from this kind of motion to this kind of motion. Yeah, exactly. And you can think of almost anything that would be that wood chop motion. When you use a weight or a cable or a band or something or a shira, you can do that. And you can go through any range of motion.
So what do these do for you? These particular motions, like when you utilize them?
This would be to incorporate into your well-rounded cross-training program. So these are exercises you should be doing in some capacity. So there are variations on them. Yep, with weights. Yeah, you can do it with weights. Sometimes body weight's enough, especially if you're doing it fast. I think if you're going for like really quick motions, that's hard enough sometimes. But this ends up being a full body exercise because for those of you that can see my feet, I'm actually going up onto one toe, coming all the way down. So you can make this as athletic as you would like it to be, or small, depending on how much core activation you want to go with. But it's very much getting the whole body to kind of work together. I mean, how many times have we seen choreography that ends up going like this? And you're like, well, that is literally a wood chop. So if you're having to sing while doing that, and then smile afterwards. And act like you did not just break out into stuff as you're like, watermelon, watermelon, watermelon to your friend next to you. Like, then you think you have to really get this into your routine. So wood chops are number 2. Number 3 is the back fly. So I like this because it strengthens everything in your back. Instead of doing like a bunch of rows and then a bunch of lat pull downs, sometimes you can just get it done with a back fly. So for this, you can do it in like a little hinge position. Your hands start in front of you and you lift the arms to the side like you're fine. You're going to think of almost pinching your shoulder blades together, but without puffing your chest. So that's the hard part. It's not we're not doing Britney Spears choreography today, but we're using the back muscles to get that to work. And there are obviously variations on this as well. You can do single arm at a time, which if you're holding a weight, becomes a core exercise at the same time. Because as you're moving this, the other side has to keep you still, so you end up getting a lot of variation there. I even have people doing it slightly overhead into like a Y formation, because that might be something that they're struggling with. Maybe their shoulders keep shrugging or they're getting irritation in their neck. So we end up changing that into not just a standard back fly, but also moving through, like we're doing little wings on the side. So these are all great things to put in. Number 4, we'll get to lower body now, the standard squat. Because every time you sit in a chair and go to the bathroom, you are in a squat. So I don't want to hear that squats are bad for your knees, because that is not true.
And you know, we're with theater people, it's not a bobby pin.
Okay. So squats are also something you can do in pretty much any formation. So you can do it with feet together and squatting as low as you can. You can do it with feet wide and as far low as you can. You can do little miniature squats. You can do sumo squats, which almost look like a grand plie. So you can go into any variation that you want to, or potentially need to. Exactly. You can even make it with a porta bra if you want. But there are many variations of squats. There are single leg squats. There are split squats. There are cosine squats. So like there are a ton of different squats that you can do. All of them are basically the same motion because it's sitting in a chair and coming back up. It's a lot at first, but if you really break it down, it's like there's really only 7 things you need. That's a doable number. You can get that done in 30 minutes if you're doing a few sets of each of these, and you literally hit your whole body. Like you don't have to spend 4 hours in the gym doing a bunch of crap just because you saw it on Instagram. Like you can actually just do normal human movement and make it work for you. So squats are great. You can add weight to that. You can do it. I know a lot of people have tight heel cords, tight Achilles. So sometimes you're like, I can't go very low because my ankles won't let me. Let your heels lift. You can put a book or something underneath your heels so that you're slightly lifted. You can still squat like that, that's fine. Your knees are allowed to go beyond your toes. They do every day when you go up and down a step. So these are normal activities. Yeah, I learned something new. They're supposed to. Actually trying to not do it means you're limiting your range of motion. So anytime someone's like, I can't go there, it's every time you sit you do though. I mean, most people have to go pretty low into chairs, especially if you're gonna go sit on a toilet. They're not very tall. So like you're usually in a pretty low squat already. Your knees are beyond your toes, that's okay. If it hurts, obviously talk to someone like me. But we can figure that out. It doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be doing damage to your body. It's a normal motion you should be able to do. Following squats are lunges, and I showed you some things that kind of sound the same as a lunge. I prefer doing lunges in more of a, instead of starting in a position and then lunging, I do it more as a movement. So a forward lunge would be that, where you'd step forward to then find your lunge and then have to push back. So then you're moving through space. You can also do a back lunge by stepping back and then coming through. You can do a side lunge in the same way. So it's like there are many variations there. I tend to do this with people when they're trying to get back into jumping as well, because I will find a position for them and then have them actually jump. So I'm getting their front leg to do the work, so they're having to press off, or their back leg. So if they're actually having to go from here and jumping, then we're going into a step jump or a turn. So you can see these are all almost preps for the next movement you would do in choreography. And it's good for pivoting, which we do a lot. Anyways. Finally, the last 2, we have deadlifts. These are another one that a lot of people avoid because they think they're bad for you. They're not. You do it every time you go to tie your shoe or to put the dog. Because we have a very good treat. So a deadlift is essentially dead weight is what you're picking up. That's why it's called deadlift. You bend over, you stand back up. You can do this with a straight back or a bench back. Yes, you can bend your back in a deadlift. It's called a different thing. This just has someone's name attached to it. But there's both deadlifts. So if you see people having to round, that's okay. If it hurts, they don't do it in the moment. But you are allowed to round your back for a deadlift. It's more about how much can you actually move through your torso and your lower body. Single leg deadlifts are the same thing. So then you get into balance and trying to find that position. You'll see I'm actually bending my knee for this one because that is a perfectly acceptable variation. If I hyperextend, it's actually not good for me, because then I fall back. So it's a matter of what can your body do. I find that most people would rather be able to just do something at home, or when they have time. So instead of having to carve out for a few exercises, you can do this on your own. Push-ups are excellent. You do not have to do them on the floor. I am not someone who is strong enough to do them on the floor. I do them, you can do them on your knees. Tell me what you want me to do. So, you want to push-up, do it. Yes, you can. Okay, so you do a push-up, great. This is also a core exercise. This is why I don't say, this is why I don't say do planks, because if you're doing all these other things, you're actually getting your core to engage in like real movement. Because we don't tend to like, and then do nothing.
Yeah.
Like we tend to have to do a few things at once in life. And so a push-up is actually a plank on steroids, because you're having to keep that plank position as you are moving your body through space. It's actually that much better. You're getting way more bang for your buck. You can do it off of a wall. So I'm someone that I will do it on an elevated surface. So you can do it off a wall, that way you know you're hitting the right position and you can still use your arms. You can do it off of a chair, exactly. So you can find the height that works for you and is that you can be successful at repeatedly. And then you can go from there. So I've seen people go from doing it on an elevated like bar height for a while, and after they get to that, they go like, oh, I can actually do it like on my couch now. Oh, I can actually kind of do it on the foot. They can actually get to the floor much better than if they start with doing it on their knees and the hands on the floor. Because it's physics at this point, but when you're doing it on your knees, it shortens how much weight you're actually moving. As soon as you bring the legs in, you're now way heavier. So you were practicing at a much lower weight. And it doesn't matter if you do 100 on your knees, it's not the same as even doing 1 on your feet. It just doesn't. It's not really the same capacity there. So, of course, yeah. So those are the 7. Do you have any questions about them? Yes?
How long would you expect to take? So let's say someone is starting off and they're incapable of doing someone who has a lot of inconsistency. How long would you say is a reasonable amount of time to have to do push-up variance before you can do push-up?
That is actually going to be person dependent. I will say that strength-wise, it takes a good 6 to 8 weeks for you to build up like objective strength differences. So that means something that even like I could test on you. You might feel stronger after 2 weeks of doing an exercise, but it takes a good 6 to 8 weeks to actually get a noticeable change. So if you were starting this out and you're doing the appropriate number of reps for you, you're resting enough for you, it's very person dependent. But if you're doing it consistently enough, I would say 6 to 8 weeks is when you're going to notice you're at a different level. Although sometimes people get it a little sooner if they're just really on top of it and their body's adapting a little bit quicker. So I'm going to sit down. Okay, so those are the 7 there. If there are other questions too, we're also going to have a Q&A at the end. So if you have more things as they pop up, we will answer those. But since we have all of those exercises together, I wanted to bring up how to be efficient with your time. So I mentioned if you can do these 7 exercises, you can get that done in 30 minutes if you're only doing like 2 sets of 10 of each, with a little bit of rest in between. You could still make that happen and it wouldn't be 4 hours in the gym. You wouldn't have to go, okay, well now I have to get a gym membership, and then I have to go and wait for like machines and stuff, and then I don't know what to do, and then maybe I'll just go to a cardio machine for a little bit. And you don't have to carve out all that time. And when you're in things like rehearsals, you don't have time. So let's be real. If you're in rehearsals and then also in previews, there's literally no time. So it becomes when is it useful for you to be doing these exercises, and how much time should you commit to them. So you can be really efficient. You just have to be smart about what you're doing in the moment, and it's actually a lot easier than people make it out to be. So you can make these 7 exercises your general well-rounded routine a few times a week. Yes, I agree. And you'll probably feel pretty good and be able to kind of bounce off of that and make up your own routines pretty quickly from there. I tend to tell people that there is a way to do it where you actually do more periodization, so it depends on what season you're in, how much you should be doing activities. So if you think of regular sports athletes, when they're off season, they do their workouts very differently than when they're in season, because you don't want to overwork out. So if you are in rehearsals and previews, you're probably not going to actually be working out as much as you will when you're actually in performance. Because once you're performing, the show is set, you have more time, you're not doing extra rehearsals, so you have time in your day, and then you have a consistent performance schedule at that point. When you're in previews, you're still making up stuff and performing at night. That is not the time to start a new routine. It is also not the time to even really be carving out a ton of time for your workouts because you're doing so much already. So you kind of have to look at what is your schedule like for people who are like bartending and catering and doing other physical jobs in between. So when you're gigging between different things, that's also physical activity. So you do have to kind of take into account that sometimes your other jobs are also physically taxing, and so vary it up from there. You don't need to overload your tissues, because then you will see me a little bit more than I would like to see you. So I like to see you all on stages, not on my tables. So that is my goal. So as I said, I just want to keep it really simple. These are multi-joint, so compound exercises. That way you get more bang for your buck, and you can actually feel what's going on in your body a lot better, and you don't have to get super fancy or have to do like a totally new routine every single day. All right, so we'll go into recovery real quick. So recovery is that like missing piece that I find a lot of people don't spend enough time on because they think, I have to just be doing more in order to get better, when most of the time they need to be doing less. They need to be pulling back and prioritizing their other healthy factors. So this is going to be in order of effectiveness, the stuff that we're going through, because there has been research on how effective these different techniques are. So we're going to go in order of least effective to most effective. That way you're not wasting all of your time on things that don't help as much. They will help a little. But,
Still do them.
Yeah, still do them, but if it's like a time thing and you're like, I don't have time for this, the last one we talk about is the number one thing you should be doing. So the least effective thing you can be doing is something like massage. I know that's something that people love. They think I need to be foam rolling for an hour, I need to be doing my cool downs, and I need to be doing lots of massaging.
We're saying these are effective.
They're still effective.
Yeah, we're not saying don't do them. We're saying
but it's like if you're exhausted and it's 11 o'clock at night and you just have to get up early in the next morning, like maybe that's not the thing you need to be doing, because the number one thing is sleep. So, which we get to. So, but it's one of those like don't sacrifice something really effective for something that's gonna kind of help. Mm-hmm. So massage is the least effective. It still is, but it is the least effective. So getting massages or massaging yourself using Theraguns, that kind of thing, foam rollers, those are massage techniques. Tools, any kind of like scraping, that kind of stuff. Movement and compression are also in that category. So if you're doing like gentle movements like yoga type stuff and stretching and doing almost that active recovery, it is still helpful. It's more helpful than massage. And compression is something more like, if you've seen those Normatec boots, I know there's lots of knockoffs now too, where they do like actual compression. Feels great. It really, I use it with my people all the time if you're in a time crunch. And then finally with that, baths are another thing. So people will do like hot baths because that can be really relaxing. It can also assist with your blood flow. So when you're in a hot bath or a hot shower, when you come out of it, it decreases your body temp, which makes it easier for you to then fall asleep, which is a good thing. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, there's ice baths, which have their own effectiveness. They can help with soreness. They don't necessarily help with a ton of other performance activities, although some research shows that they might help with things like keeping your power and your flexibility long term. But baths are a great way of getting your body to kind of recalibrate and recover.
Our next one is nutrition. So having proper intake, nutrient mix, that's essential. Obviously hydration goes into this as well. So making sure that we're, again, eating a mix of foods, eating them throughout the day, hydrating throughout the day, and then looking at your specific nutritional needs. Something we see a lot of performers, particularly within dancers, but anyone who's doing a lot of repetitive movement, you're at a higher risk of bone density issues, fractures, breaks, things like that, particularly if you're under eating. again, I could spend like an hour talking about this topic alone, especially another webinar on it, but our bone health is so tied to our nutrition. So making sure we're consuming enough food, that we're having calcium and vitamin D, as well as there's a lot of other vitamins and minerals that contribute to bone health, like vitamin K. And then, you know, the mix of weight-bearing exercise, but also rest. A lot of people know, like, yes, some pounding movement is good for bone density, but too much is harmful. So we want to also take rest days. Rest days are very important, which I think leads into our next one.
Yeah, so that also then leads into sleep. Sleep is the number one way that you recover. It's something that every human and every animal needs in order to recover. If it's something that literally everything in the world does, it's probably important. Sleep is that thing. Your brain literally cleans itself overnight when you sleep, so it literally helps you become smarter when you sleep. Not just physically, but like mentally and emotionally as well. So sleep is the number one way. If you don't have time or energy, or if you were just all over the place, prioritize your sleep. As an adult, that is between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. Anything below that 7 hours, it actually kind of mimics being drunk. They've actually shown, they've had studies of people with 6 hours of sleep, and and if you're constantly functioning at that level, you're kind of functioning at the same level as someone who's under the influence. So which is wild, but it also kind of makes sense when you start to kind of flub things and you don't remember as much stuff. You might be like just messing up on lines, or maybe you're just getting really frustrated with people. It might be your sleep. So this will help you physically, mentally, emotionally, and obviously in your performance as well. So always, always, always get your sleep in. If you have to prioritize something, do not replace sleep with, oh, I'll just get a massage and then I'll do Normatec and then I'll just do a bath. If you have to prioritize it, please, please, please do sleep. I see it all the time. I didn't do my cool down, I didn't do my stretches, and I'm like, you went to bed at 1 in the morning and I'm doing that. Yeah, it wasn't because you didn't do your cool down. It was because you didn't sleep. So please, please, please sleep. So
sleep was our number one, but I have a bonus tip, and we kind of talked about it, but it's taking time off. So again, we think of theater folks, and really all humans, as athletes. So if you had a professional athlete, they work in seasons. You know, whether they're a baseball player or an Olympic athlete or, you know, in Little League or whatever, like they are not going 100% all year round. They do a season. So they have training, they have performance, and they have time off. And that time off doesn't mean they're laying on the couch doing nothing. Like there's, again, the cross training and some other movement, but they're not operating at 100% every day. So I encourage everyone to at least take a rest day every week, if not 2 or 3, depending on what your needs are. And then also think of your body, your physicality in seasons of the year as well. So if you're doing a really intense show, you probably need a little time off after that to let your body recuperate or go into something less intensive. So maybe you're doing, you know, a high dance choreography show, and then, you know, I'm talking ideal world, you get contracts with me, you take what you get, right? But like, maybe your next show would be like a straight play that you're sitting around already, you know, so like we're doing this, or, you know, giving yourself that grace of, you know, I'm in between contracts right now, and maybe it's just a time to focus on your body while you're looking for that next job. It's okay to kind of take it low-key for a little bit and let your body recuperate.
Yeah, I tend to tell my people to schedule around their rest day instead of making that the last thing. So most people on an 8-show week, you know, you get the one rest day that your work gives you. It doesn't necessarily mean you can get that all in that one day. So if you can only schedule around the one time, you make it happen. So even in your normal routine, it's a priority of Sundays are my rest. So that is something that's a non-negotiable. Everything works around that time instead of waiting until the end of the week to see if I can squeeze something in. So you'll always find a way to keep yourself busy if you don't schedule it out first. So give yourself that rest.
We're even talking like social engagements and stuff. When we're thinking about like getting enough sleep, it's, you know, what days do I need to prioritize that I'm in bed early? I'm not going to go out with friends that night or something, so that I'm taking care of my body. And that can be a hard, you know, choice to make in the moment, but you have to think about what's the goal of what I'm doing right now.
Right. And rest can also be doing some other like hobby. So if you're someone that like you're really physical because you're doing that all the time, you're taking all the classes and you're doing all the things, and you're maybe forsaking some of the hobbies that you just enjoy doing, that can also be considered rest. It's letting your body and your brain just kind of go into something else for a bit, which is really nice and then makes you a happier, healthier human as well.
So that was the presentation. We'd love to tell you a little bit about how to work and when to work with a dietitian or a physical therapist, and also take Q&A. So just real briefly, when to work with us. And this is, not us specifically, but across the board. So when to work with a registered dietitian. Honestly, I think similar to therapy, anyone can work with a registered dietitian. You don't need to have a problem or a diagnosis. It's really going to the professional expert for help on how to fuel your body for you individually. And within that, there are different specialties of dietitians. I also just really briefly want to say, does everyone know the difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist? Okay, a lot of no's. I love educating you on this. So, in the United States, there is no legal stance behind the term nutritionist. So literally anybody can call themselves a nutritionist regardless of training. You could, my dog can be a nutritionist. She's had no training. You could have a bachelor's degree in nutrition. You can call yourself a nutritionist. Everything in between doesn't mean that there's necessarily education behind it. A registered dietitian is a medical professional. So at this point, we've had a minimum of a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics. We've done an internship, which is similar to a medical residency, supervised training, continuing education, board exams, all of that stuff. So we are, along with doctors, the only individuals allowed to give medical-specific diets. And let's face it, most doctors have had one nutrition class in their entire 8+ years of schooling, so we don't talk to dietitians. And then just like any other professional, we have specialty areas as well. So no one would want to talk to me about pediatrics or diabetes. I know hardly anything about those. You want to talk to me if you're a performer or you have an eating disorder, that's all I do. So looking for a dietitian that can work with what you're looking for. So if you are a performer, you want someone who understands that. If you have diabetes and you want education on that, you want someone who's a diabetes educator. So you're looking for your specifics. But I feel like everyone could really benefit from at least a couple sessions with a dietitian. And then depending on what you have going on, if you need more specifics, if you're optimizing performance, working through an eating disorder, or something that's a little more intensive, you might be working with them a little longer, but you really are there to help you be the best self that you want.
And as for physical therapists, it's very similar to registered dietitians. We're doctors. Thank you, Ted. we are doctors, so we do get formal education in that. And basically, we can help you with your entire body, which is kind of nice. So we do literally the entire life spectrum. I had to take pediatrics, including neonatal, all the way up to geriatrics and life. So, but I specialize in performing artists and more orthopedic style injuries. Although I also specialize in hypermobility and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so there's a lot of complex pain and other things that go along with that. So it's always helpful to find someone that specializes in what you're looking for. But in the case of when should you start working with a PT, you can work with us on a prehab basis or in more of an injury prevention basis. That is what I do and what I love to do more than just the fixing the boo-boos kind of part of PT. But we also do that too. So if you obviously have a surgery, you should go to a PT. If you have a pain or if you have a question about pain or something starting to give you a little niggle about it and you're like, I don't really know what this is, instead of guessing and Googling, and just talk to someone who might actually be able to go hey, so here's
No, Dr. Google.
Yeah, Dr. Google is it gives you almost too much information to work with. If you want just the quickest alternative, just talk to an expert. And I'm always free to I do virtual consults that are free as well. So if people have questions, they can always get a little 15-minute call with me and just to see if you need more help or not. Yeah.
And with that, I think we'll open it up for questions. Yes.
On the topic of rest and recovery, do you ever advise your clients to take a midday break, and even if it's not a nap per se, would they actually sleep? Are there any training mechanisms to get a specific routine where you recover for 19 minutes, an hour, or whatever?
So when it comes to like midday stuff, it's still going to be dependent upon the person too. So like I'm someone that likes doing mindfulness and meditation in that kind of way of like, so just get away from everybody and like just be a body for a bit. And so it kind of depends on the person and what they want to do. I know I have friends with ADHD that they can't, like that's torture for them to try to be a body for 10 minutes. So that might not be the thing for them. So maybe it is like taking a walk around the block, so they're literally separating themselves from the other stuff. But yeah, there are definitely
Like stepping away from what you're doing, yeah.
and even if it's just 10 minutes, it's usually enough. It's just enough to kind of get your brain to switch task and then hold on to something for a little bit, which is somewhere in that like 10 to 20 minute period, and then you can kind of come back.
Hand in the back, yes.
So this is about the dietitian part you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's often mentioned that a diet should consist of, for performing artists or athletes, 50% carbohydrates and then supplement that with proteins or fats to fill in. So I have a friend here who is diabetic, and carbohydrates are really bad for the blood sugars. Is there a type of food or a food group that you can pair with proteins or fats that will have the same effect but won't raise your glucose levels?
Okay, great question. So as again, I said I'm not the diabetes expert, but I know more than the average Joe on the street. And diabetics can absolutely have carbohydrates. It is more about amounts, timing, and if they need medication like insulin and P5 to go along with that. So it would still be the same for them. They might need a slightly lower amount of carbohydrates. I believe for diabetics, it's about 45% of the diet. I'm getting a yes from someone who has diabetes. So yeah, about 45% of the diet is carbohydrates. So it really is more just about making sure your timing and amounts are appropriate. And then again, if you need medication like insulin, dosing that appropriately, because that can also get really dangerous if you're opening insulin. Yes.
That says that you show. So I have a torn labral tear. So does that go for someone has a torn labral tear?
It could be depending on whether it hurts. So that is usually like the sign that I go by of, does this hurt? Okay, so if it does, yes. So, but in general, like if something hurts, it's always worth it to like take a pause and see if you can modify in the moment. And so maybe it's not a complete like get rid of it, but it's a like, this seems interesting. Let me do a slightly different version of it, or maybe a slightly smaller version of it. See if I can do that really well. Because most of the time, the things that hurt are also the things you eventually need to be able to get back to, and you can't get back to it if you avoid it forever. And for labral tears, labral tears, there are labrums in your shoulders and your hips. And so you have, they're like little soft tissues that sit there so that you can actually get really easy movement in the joint.
Well, mine's in the hip.
Okay, so there you go. Yeah, so depending on what body part it is, it might bother you more for a squat versus an overhead press. So you can just kind of get it.
Looks like what is a labral tear, so I'm not going to explain it.
Yeah, so
Some of us heard labial.
Oh, yes.
yeah, no, that's a very different thing. Yeah, still, but that's the thing. Like the general rule is, if it hurts, take a step back, modify from there, and then talk to someone who can actually help you kind of modify around that and get through it. Yes, in the very back.
Okay, so my fiance, he actually works really difficult hours. He starts work at 4 a.m. and gets done at 1:30 p.m. I was just wondering, you have like he's naturally a night owl, so he has trouble falling to sleep and getting that full 7 to 8 hours. I didn't know if you have any recommendations for that. And I also wanted to see, he takes V8 energy drinks in the morning. What are your thoughts on those?
You said V8? Oh, V8? Oh, okay. Energy drinks.
Yeah.
I didn't know they do energy drinks.
Okay.
It's not just the vegetable juice.
You know, but it's like negative, like
I'm Googling this now. You answered the other part, I'm looking up what that is.
So it is challenging when you're more of a night owl. He might have to find routines that get him to fall asleep a little bit more. So that might be doing like your sleep hygiene. He might have to focus on maybe doing more of like a hot shower or hot bath at night that then cools his body temp, which will then make him fall asleep a little faster. Avoiding more lights and like watching TV, looking at your screen, that kind of thing. Being in a really dark, quiet room, making sure it's cold. So he might have to find routines to get his body to actually like calm down and realize like, oh, it's time to sleep now. So that way he's not trying to fall asleep at the time that he should already be asleep. It should be something that's kind of like prepping him for it. It is hard, that is a really hard schedule to work with.
Thoughts on like using melatonin as a sleep aid?
So that actually that's had some really interesting research over the years as we've been doing more. Of a lot of the over-the-counter are not great because it's actually not regulated, and so people are getting way overdosed with that, which can actually have a long-term effect of creating more insomnia issues later on. So it might help in the short term, but it doesn't necessarily help in the long term, which is not ideal. So with that, I mean, all the stuff that I've seen on that has been like, maybe avoid it, but if you have to, do it with an actual medical doctor who can prescribe the appropriate amount, not just the over-the-counter.
Do you have any alternatives to recommend other than getting into routine? Do you have anything that you take in?
I haven't seen any research on something that will help you fall asleep faster or to actually have better sleep. Because a lot of times people will use things like alcohol to get themselves to fall asleep faster, but then they don't hit deep sleep, so it's not restful. Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, so there are a lot of things that might like seem to achieve it. A lot of it is you have to find a routine. It's a long game in that case.
Thank you.
Okay, and I found the energy drinks. So the V8 energy drinks. I don't want to say this with confidence because this is literally just me Googling the nutrition facts for the first time. So take this as you will. I am not seeing any ingredients in here that are scary to me, which, you know, I'm typically looking for things like guarana and taurine and things like that. I'm not seeing any of that. So it does have caffeine from black and green tea. And I think where more of the energy is coming from are there's like extra doses of B vitamins in there. So not as bad as like the rock stars and Red Bulls and all of that stuff. Use with caution. Okay, and we're wrapping up now. So I think we can hang out outside and answer more questions if you want, but thank you so much for coming.
Oh my gosh, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I mean, like you can start doing that on your own site.
Right.
The trade is really more it's
I do know, and really
I can hold that for you. Sure, thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a dog person, like, you know, I train, I do everything.
Thank you so much. But
I also, yes, have a performer support group coming on.
Oh,
There it is. Yeah, that's on my Instagram as well, so you can check out it.
Great.